G'day and welcome back to MotoringBox. On today's episode we are hunting for a misfire on my BA Falcon XR6 Turbo. So if you're not familiar with my channel, I've owned this car for about 1 or 2 months now and it's been superb. But one thing about it is it's never quite idled perfectly smooth. And ever since I've owned the car, it's been slowly getting worse. And what happens now is on idle, or pretty much any revs below around 1000 RPM, you'll get this misfire. I've noticed the handbrake and I think the ABS warning lights will sort of pulse as well. So what I'm doing today is hopefully rectifying that problem with a bit of routine maintenance. Now, when I purchased this car, the previous owner told me that the last time he had the car serviced, the mechanic told him the spark plugs were due to be replaced. So guess what? That's what we're doing first. So I've got a set of OEM Ford Motorcraft spark plugs specifically to suit the XR6 Turbo. These have a 1.1mm gap, and considering this thing runs stock boost, I think they're going to perform really well. And because I don't really have many service records on this car, I know the car has been serviced at the proper intervals, but it doesn't really list what actually was replaced at each service. So I've also got a set of proper Ford genuine coil packs to go along with the spark plugs. So that's really the job for today. We're going to have to remove this intake crossover and maybe some of the ducting as well. To get access to this cover which sits on top of the engine, we need to take that off to get access to the coil packs and the spark plugs which are sitting down the center. But before we do that, let me show you what this engine is actually doing. So that gives you an idea of what I'm up against here. So hopefully the new spark plugs and the new coil packs are going to fix the problem. If they don't, the next point of call is probably the intake manifold. And apparently on Barra engines in general, the intake manifold gaskets are common points of failure. So if the intake gaskets are stuffed, they're going to allow air to be sucked into the manifold from the outside, and it's going to mess up the air-fuel ratio and cause a misfire, which sounds very similar to that. So really the misfire issue is probably going to be one or the other of those problems. Hopefully I've guessed correctly and it's the spark plugs and the coil packs, but even if it isn't, it's going to be good to have fresh spark plugs and coil packs in this engine anyway. So let's get into it. Alright guys, we're trying something a little bit different today. I've got you guys on helmet cam, so I'm going to be bringing you along for this job. It's going to be a long run, so let's get a beverage in first. Okie dokie. So first we need to get this intake crossover taken off. So I've got to release these two intake pipes here and also the one over here which runs to the airbox. Sorry if some of my motions are a little bit odd today because this GoPro is actually sitting right between my eyes, so it's kind of blocking some of my vision. But hopefully I can still get this job done. So we're going to loosen these two hose clamps here and this one over here as well, of course. So we don't need to take the airbox out for this one. We just need to get the pipe out of the way and get this crossover taken off. So there are also 3 nuts. There's also another one hiding over the back here, which I need to take off. So luckily I've got this new Stanley socket set, which should hopefully help me get the job done. And this one still has a 10mm socket. It's probably the only socket set I have that still actually has one. So, happy days. I'm glad to finally have a 10mm again, which I can use because it's nothing worse than trying to get a shifter or something onto there instead. Because wouldn't be much fun. So let's get these 3 nuts off. Ease it off the rest of the way. Oh, I'll have to go get that one later. Having this GoPro between my eyes has made me a little bit more clumsy than usual. But we'll see how we go. All right. Might move those nuts somewhere safer. Oh, and of course, to get this crossover off, we also need to loosen this one to the throttle body as well. Now, I'm really hoping I don't have to remove these pipes entirely. Hopefully, I can just leave them there in place. And that's right, that one pulls out of there. Hopefully. Oh, there we go. Gee, that one was barely on at all. I wonder if that was part of my problem. This rubber joiner here is actually in really shit condition as well. You notice it's kind of split along the back edge there, but luckily I've got a replacement. So I'll be able to move my hose clamps across and put that new joiner on to get rid of that one. But that's rather interesting. That hose was barely in the joiner, so I wonder if I had a bit of a leak there as well. That'd be interesting. There we go. Don't mind all the heavy breathing. All right. So we just need to pull off the blow-off valve. So we just need to pull off the blow-off valve connection as well. Some of those joiners are also looking a little bit ratty, so I'll probably have to replace them too at some stage. And remove this from the vehicle. Awesome. Okay, so we'll get rid of this rubber joiner as well. And our spark plugs and coil packs are actually living under this cover here. So we just need an Allen key fitting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's probably going to be that one right there. There we go. I'll just use that one. I know it's a Torx in an Allen key sort of a bit there, but you know, these aren't on super tight anyway, so she'll be right. Look at that. Barely any force at all and they're coming undone. That one's a little bit tighter. I'll skip ahead a little bit so you don't have to watch me undo every single one. So this cover is actually responsible for holding down the coil packs as well. There are apparently some little rubber bumpers which sit attached to the underside of this thing. Keep that washer together with that guy. But yeah, apparently there's some little sort of rubber bumps which sit on the underside of this cover. And when you reattach this cover, they actually press down onto the tops of the coil packs. So when we're removing this cover, we just need to make sure we don't lose any of those little rubber bumpers. Tell you what, the Barra is a really awesome looking engine, isn't it? Even with the intake ducting stripped off the top. Just looks the business. I love the color they've gone with too. If anything, the blue they've used on the FPV engines, like in the F6 Typhoon, probably looks a little bit better. But you know, the red just looks... Oh, there goes another one. Hopefully that one went all the way through. But I'll fish that out. That's 2 things I've lost down there now. The nut for the intake crossover. And now that. You know, it's always really shitty when they land on the under tray, because then you got to try and take that out or try and get them off. Gee, that's put up a fight. We'll get rid of the oil cap. Let me changing the oil probably in the next video, just because I think it's not due for another couple of thousand Ks. But you know, with things like oil, especially in a turbocharged engine, you really benefit from changing it more often than what they specify, just because, you know, turbos do run hot, and the oil is actually circulating through the turbocharger, of course, as well, through this hard line, which I'm also going to replace because that is another common point of failure. So we'll just should be able to pop this cover up. Looks like we got We should just be able to pop that hose out of that little holder on the back there. There we go. And we should just be able to pull this out of the way. Okay. Now there's a gasket there as well. Now this is the reason why you should never hose down the top. Okay, there you go, there's two as well. I'm clumsy today. So this is the reason why you shouldn't hose down the top of a Barra engine, because even though there is this seal that runs around the top here, if you get any water in here, it'll go down into the valleys where the spark plugs are, and it can actually short them out. So you'll see here's some of the little rubber bumpers that I was talking about. The top cover holds down, pushes down in there and holds the coil pack onto the top of the spark plug. And there's a few more here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's the other two there, 1, 5 and 6. So I'll leave that there upside down. I should probably just pull the coil packs out. See, they're really just sitting there at the moment. Look at that, it's some oil. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. But yeah, I should be able to just pull this connector off like that. There we go. Very interesting. I wonder if that's the source of my misfire. I'll have to see. It doesn't look too bad. You probably can't see it, but down where the spark plug is in the bottom there, I can't see any oil. It just seems to be up here on the top. Perhaps this seal here actually stopped it from going down until I pulled it out. Wow, very interesting. Okay, get rid of that. So we'll pull these connectors off. That one doesn't look, it's got a bit of oil on it too. Number 3. Finally, we've got one that's clean. I'm going to have to do a quick search a bit later on and see what the go is with oil and coil packs. I'm assuming it is the rocker cover gasket, which would be responsible for that. Spring was holding onto the spark plug a bit there, but it came off in the end. Tell you what, it's quite funny doing some work on an engine with a GoPro between your eyes. It actually really throws you off. Put that little rubber bump over there as well. Cool. That one's clean too. So what we should do now, I think, we'll put the oil cap back on just so we don't get any rubbish falling down there. Apart from the oil, the insides of these spark plug tubes here actually look quite clean. So if yours are dirty at all, you should probably try and get an air compressor and blast out any of the shit. In my case, I'm just going to leave this all alone. If I start trying to wipe some of this shit off, I'm worried it's going to fall down in the pits there. So what I'm going to do is just leave it and see if I can get these spark plugs out. So this is a 16mm spark plug adapter, which should let us pull these out. That was actually not really done up all that tightly, the first one. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like. Okay, it feels like it is now. Okay, interesting. What I'll do is I'll grab one of these new plugs and we'll just have a quick look. Yeah, you know, look, I'm not an expert on spark plugs. It does look like the gap on the old ones is a little bit smaller. And yeah, I guess the electrode does look a little bit more worn. Doesn't look too bad though, apart from that. So we'll see how the other plugs look. I'll put them all in a line so we know which plug is from which cylinder. That one looks rather similar to the first one. All right. So I'm just trying to not disturb any of that oil and crud which is sitting on the side there. Get these plugs out and then we'll get the new ones in as soon as possible. I know that last one, number 6, is apparently a real bastard to get out. We'll see how we go with it. Again, that one looks very similar to the others. All right. Of course, you can do a compression test as well if you want to test just how well your cylinders are sealing. But, you know, this engine does run really well in general, so I'm not really concerned about compression. Again, looks pretty good. You know, it seems you don't need to do these spark plugs up very tightly. I guess you just put them in until you feel it starting to seat, and then you probably just give it like another half turn. I couldn't really find any information on what sort of torque you need to do these up to, so I don't know if there is actually a setting. Let's have a look. Again, looks pretty much like the other four so far. All right, now this last one, you can't actually get that whole setup in there. So I might have to see, can I get, no, that's too long as well. Okay, let's go for the shorter one. But then, how far down does that go? Shit. I'm gonna lose that down there if I just drop it down. That's gonna be fun. All the other stuff I've got is, I'll probably get 2 of these short ones, I'm guessing. That might just be enough to do the trick. Or do you have to drop, maybe you have to drop the first one down, and then once it's down there, attach that one. Just to try and get past the firewall. So I tell you what guys, you're gonna need probably more than one socket set, because this little extender piece is, how long is that? They don't actually say, but you know how most socket sets have 2 different lengths of extensions? You have a short one and then you'll have a longer one. It looks like you're gonna need 2 of these shorter ones to get the job done. So I'll drop this one down the back here. So I'll drop that. Oh, it's a bit nerve-wracking dropping that down. And then hopefully we can just pop this one into the top like so. All right. Gee, that's hard work. Thanks, Ford. Putting the firewall in the way. Wonder if that's one of those things where they discovered it was an issue and then they just said, you know what, stuff it. We're just going to run with it. So we're going to have to try and take the ratchet part off the top here. Try and pull it up. And then I guess remove the top section and then try and pull it the rest of the way out. All right, I think that's out. Yeah, so you can't actually pull that up. So I think what we're gonna have to do, oh geez. You can pull it up a bit of the way. Oh, I don't wanna, it's hard to do because, there we go. So bring that first extension out of the way. And there we have it, the 6th and final spark plug, which again, to me, looks all right. So far, so good. So I guess what I'll do is I'll whack in the new replacement spark plugs and we'll go from there. Because the first 2 cylinders here, where the spark plugs and the core packs are, actually had a bit of oil in there, I decided to nip up these 2 bolts just to try and hold this rocker cover down a little bit harder and hopefully stop that from happening. But we'll see. I'll have to pull these apart in another couple of 1,000 kilometers. So what I'm going to do now is go through and install the 6 new spark plugs just so I can prevent any shit from falling down into the cylinders. All right, let's go. So these are actually a Denso spark plug SK20R11 Iridium. I have heard that the Barra engines do love the Iridium spark plugs, and these are actually gapped, as I mentioned, to 1.1 millimeters. I guess you could re-gap them down to 0.9 or 0.8, which is what I've heard people run on their Barras when they're running higher boost. But because I've just got stock standard boost on this thing, I'm just going to leave it alone. These are the factory Ford spark plugs for this engine. And because I've got the factory coils as well, there should be no reason why these don't run awesomely if I install them into the engine. So because This gap on these spark plugs is actually a really finely measured thing. We need to be really careful that we don't bang that end of the spark plug against anything on the engine when we lower it down. So we need to be really careful, lower it down perfectly into the hole and then start screwing it in. Got to make sure it's screwing in nice and smoothly. If it's putting up a fight, you may be starting to cross thread the spark plug into the head, so that's definitely not what we want to do. So I'm barely applying any force here at all, just nice and slowly. It's now putting up a bit of resistance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten it probably another quarter to half a turn. So it's putting up resistance now. I'll probably go with about half a turn. I really don't want to go much further than that. It's not giving up the spark plug tool. Gee, that's a bit of an inconvenience. So I guess I'm going to have to use some pliers to get that out. There we go. So spark plug number 2 now. Again, nice and carefully down into the cylinder and start screwing it in nice and gently, nice and smoothly. It's not putting up a fight, it's good. Must be going into that thread beautifully. So again, once it hits resistance, which is right here, I'm going to put, oh, that one's a bit tighter. So I'm going to put roughly a quarter to half a turn. And again, it's not giving up the tool, so we'll need the pliers for that one. That's going to be fun in the final cylinder, isn't it? There we go. So we'll go for number 3 now. Down into the hole, there we go. I love it when you get a nice easy insertion first time around. It's nothing worse than having to fight your way in. All right, put a bit of a half turn to finish that off. Again, fish our extension out of there. It's annoying. And again, be very wary of the end of this plug. We don't want to damage it. Or we don't want to change the millimeter measurement of that gap is the most important thing. So don't smash it on anything on the way down. Another thing while you're working here is obviously make sure nothing goes into the throttle body or into the intake pipes. It's pretty clean though, because I did clean this engine a couple of weeks ago. Check out the video. I'll put a link in the top corner of the video here of me cleaning it, because it was using tire foam, Armor All tire foam actually, and it did an amazing job. I was really happy with how it turned out. Of course, it's still a little bit dirty here under the top cover, but you know, you never see that, so it doesn't really matter. All right, number 5 is heading in. GoPro is shielding my vision a little bit, which makes it a little bit tricky. There we go. So we'll go for about that much. Again, about a quarter to a half a turn I've found. Fishing out my little extension piece. Here we go. Now, what we're going to have to do, because I can only fit the socket bit here and this little extension, I'm going to have to feed it down there and then feed it down there as far as I can until my fingers don't fit, and then just drop it. Luckily it's not too far. And then all I got to do is get rid of this long extension, find my short one. All right, drop that into the end of that. All right. Tell you what, doing this sort of work as well also gives your legs and your back a workout, because the back of my calf muscles on my legs are screaming at the moment, because when you're leaning forward, it's really those muscles that run down the back of your leg which really hold you in place. So Tell you what, who needs a gym membership when you do work on cars? Because by the end of the day, you know, if you've been doing this sort of work for a couple of hours, your legs and your back are going to be screaming, especially when you're in your mid to late 30s like I am, or even older. I imagine it probably gets worse with age. So we've just reached the point of resistance on this plug. So again, we're going to go around just past a quarter of a turn. And of course, now we're going to have to fish that out as well. Of course, it'll happen on every single cylinder. Oh, thank God. All right, plugs are in. So now it is time for our coil packs. So as before, they just drop straight in. I guess you just push them down onto the top of the spark plug, and then it's those little rubber bumpers on the underside of this cover which actually pushes them down into place. So we should just be able to drop these down. Can feel it go onto the top of the spark plug, so I guess that's really all you have to do. Get your little connector out of the way. That one's on as well. But I really do love, you know, Ford OEM parts. It just feels right, you know. And I don't know really enough about coil packs anyway. You know, there's other third-party brands, aftermarket options out there. But you know, car makers spend a lot of money making sure their parts do last a long time. I know some people think that's not the case because they want you to come in and, you know, get parts replaced on your car so they can make more money. But really, you know, car makers do spend a hell of a lot of money researching and designing these parts to perform for a certain amount of time. So, you know, for a stock application like this engine is, I definitely would trust the OEM coil packs and spark plugs probably a lot more than the aftermarket items. So let's just continue. Feed it down there, get that little plug out of the way. You can feel it go down on top of the spark plug. That's awesome. So I'm really hoping when this is all done that this engine will suddenly idle really smoothly. It is interesting, you know, if it does, it'll either be the spark plugs in these coil packs, or I wonder if this leak, this pipe here was barely hanging onto the crossover. So I wonder, I don't think a leak before the turbo would actually prevent this engine from running smoothly, but it's going to be interesting because I'll be able to obviously fix these issues here and that one too. So hopefully between the two, it's going to fix my problem. So now that the coil packs are in, we can start connecting them back up. Again, it's hard to see with the GoPro in the way of my eyes, so apologies for that. That one didn't hear a click. There we go. So I just have to connect all of these up. Okay, they don't really click on, but you just have to trust them, I guess. And then we get our loom here and continue along. Okay, they do have a little bit of a click, so you've got to listen hard for it. There we go. Number 5. Make sure they're on. Don't want to put too much stress on the wiring. All right, so that's all 6 on. So what we should be able to do now is put this cover back on, reconnect all of the intake, crossover and ducting there, and then hopefully this engine is going to run right. All right, so thanks to the wonders of film and editing, about an hour has passed and I've finally fished out the few bolts that I'd actually dropped down inside the engine there. Some of them had reached the tray in the bottom, but one of them was actually down here near the belts. It took me forever to find it. But luckily, while I was looking for those bolts, I realized I'd missed a crucial step, and that was actually refitting this gasket that fits around the underside of this cover. So we're just going to feed that into the channels here. All the way back to there. All right, so if I turn this upside down, is that going to stay? Okay, it should. Try and hold it in place as well. All right, leave that still Yep, looking good. Okay. All in all, I lost 2 of these down the... No, 3 of these actually, down to the engine. And what I also did when I was looking for these bolts is I took those 2 intake pipes off because I really want to make sure they're all seated on properly with all of their rubber seals. So I'll be able to redo all of that when I put the crossover piece back on. Put the oil cap back on as well, loosely. So I'm just putting these all in fairly loosely for now, and then I'll come back. I know some of you guys are going to criticize me for using a Torx bit here, but honestly these were not done up all that tightly anyway, so it's no issue at all with using one of these. It fits perfectly. And you know, I do have some Allen keys, but I can never find them when I need them. Probably should buy a new set. You wouldn't want to wreck the bit. You know, this one still looks unaffected. So, job done. Alright, so everything's back together, guys. Sorry I didn't film the reassembly of the crossover piece and also the intake ducting and everything. It's quite a fiddly job, and to do it with a GoPro in between your eyes is really difficult. So now that everything's back together, I guess the only thing left to do is to start this engine and see how it idles. Fingers crossed. Sounding not too bad so far. Not perfect, but better than it was. Let's go around the back and have a listen. And it doesn't appear that we're getting those lights flashing anymore. I wouldn't say it is idling as smooth as I would like it to, but I think it's an improvement, and that's the main thing. So I was about to finish up this video, and then I realized I've never actually taken you guys for a drive in this car ever since I've owned it. So now that I've got new spark plugs and new coil packs in there, I can show you how this engine is running now. So let's start it up and have a listen. Look at that, straight down to about 750 RPM idle. So I've got my 360-degree camera here, and I've also got a GoPro trained on the speedo. So let's go for a bit of a drive. I have to take it pretty easy in this car just because it still has the existing clutch, so I'm sort of limiting myself to probably half throttle. So with half throttle I can still get on the boost a little bit, and the car does still go pretty hard, but it's just frustrating, you know, not being able to use that other sort of top half of the 50% range. But you can still have plenty of fun. Clutch pedal is a little bit squeaky sometimes, but you know, straight away the engine is running a lot better than it was before. Previously it would sort of lurch a little bit and pop and sort of stutter as you're trying to take off. And I do take off at low RPMs pretty much all the time just because I am trying to save the clutch. So let's go for a bit of a spin. Nice and smooth into second. So yeah, even with half throttle, this thing still moves. You know, you can still get yourself in plenty of trouble. On the drive out here, I did notice, obviously this engine is a lot better at idle, but then higher up in the RPMs, I do think there is a little bit more power, and it is just that little bit more smoother. I don't know if that's a placebo effect, which I'm imagining, but this engine is definitely running, I think, better than it ever has. So the money I spent on the plugs and also the coil packs is definitely worth it. So yeah, I really did want to get this engine running right before I went and got the clutch replaced. Now that it is, I'm definitely on the hunt to try and find someone who can swap that clutch out for me, and also someone who doesn't mind being filmed in the process. And that's tougher than you'd think. Let's have a listen. little bit of turbo flutter there, if you heard that. But yeah, this engine's running brilliantly again, so I'm really happy. And yeah, you know, if there's any other tips you guys have got for me for trying to get this Barra running just that little bit smoother, do let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, please do consider subscribing to the channel and also checking out some of the other videos I've got over there on the side. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.